The palace gates exploded open as armored soldiers stormed through the courtyard with flaming arrows raining from the sky. Protect the king. Find the girl. Kill the maid before the prince arrives. Steel clashed against steel. Horses screamed. Fire spread across the wooden balconies of the royal palace while terrified servants ran through the smoke. And then he appeared. Crown Prince Joon. His black robe dragged through blood as he walked down the palace steps with a sword in each hand. His eyes burned with fury. Behind him stood a trembling palace maid covered in ash and tears. Ari. The captain of the royal guards pointed his blade toward the prince. Your Highness, hand over the girl. Joon stepped forward slowly. No. The king himself gave the order. Joon lifted his sword. Then tonight, even the king will fail. The guards charged at him. The first soldier swung hard toward Joon's neck, but the prince moved faster. His blade flashed through the air and the soldier collapsed instantly. Another came from behind. Joon spun and drove his sword through the man's chest without even looking. Ari gasped as more guards surrounded them. Joon, stop, please. But the prince's voice turned cold. They want your blood. Another soldier attacked. Joon sliced him across the throat. Then they'll drown in theirs first. The palace erupted into chaos. And this? This was the night the kingdom turned against its own prince. 3 years earlier. The kingdom of Hanseong-zuri feared only one man. Not the king. Not the minister of war. The crown prince. At only 26 years old, Prince Joon had already led armies into battle and returned undefeated. Enemy kingdoms called him the Black Dragon because wherever he fought, death followed. But inside the palace, people whispered something else. They said the prince had no heart. He rarely smiled. Never laughed. Never attended royal celebrations unless forced. Even during banquets, he sat silently beside the king while noble daughters competed for his attention. But he looked at none of them. One evening, rain poured across the palace roofs while servants rushed through the halls carrying candles. Inside the throne room, the king stared at his son with disappointment. You embarrassed me again tonight. Joon stood silently. The king slammed his cup down. Lady Seo-rin is the daughter of the Minister of War. Every noble family in the kingdom respects her. Yet you ignored her all evening like she was invisible. Joon finally spoke. I did not ask for a banquet. You are the future king. And yet my life belongs to everyone except me. The room became silent. The king narrowed his eyes. You speak like a child. No, Joon replied calmly. I speak like a prisoner. The king rose from his throne angrily. You will marry Seo-rin. This kingdom needs the alliance. Joon's jaw tightened. And what if I refuse? The king walked closer. You do not refuse kings. But Joon looked directly into his father's eyes. That is the problem. Then he turned and walked away. Far across the palace grounds, a young maid hurried through the rain carrying medicine herbs beneath her robe. Ari had spent her entire life inside the palace walls. Her parents had died when she was a child, and older servants raised her among the workers' quarters. She cleaned royal chambers during the day and secretly studied medicine at night under the palace healer. Unlike the nobles, Ari understood suffering. She had seen starving workers whipped for mistakes. Seen servants disappear after angering nobles. Seen innocent girls forced into silence. So she learned early that survival inside the palace meant staying invisible. That night, while rushing through a quiet corridor, Ari suddenly froze. Footsteps. Fast. Dangerous. Then shouting erupted nearby. Assassins. Protect the prince. Ari's eyes widened. Steel clanged violently somewhere ahead. She carefully peeked around the corner and gasped. Masked men dressed in black surrounded Crown Prince Joon. One assassin slashed across the prince's arm while another drove a blade toward his chest. Joon killed one instantly, but there were too many. Then an assassin stabbed the prince in the side. Blood splattered across the floor. Ari covered her mouth. The prince stumbled. The assassins prepared to strike again. But palace guards suddenly flooded the corridor. The masked men escaped into the darkness. Joon tried walking away alone, but blood soaked through his robe. He was losing too much blood. Ari hesitated. Helping the prince could get her killed. Ignoring him could also get her killed. But when she saw him press against the wall in pain, she made her choice. Quietly, she approached him. "Your Highness." Joon immediately grabbed her wrist and pinned her against the wall despite his injury. His sword touched her throat. "Who sent you?" Ari trembled. "No one." Joon's eyes were cold enough to freeze fire itself. "Then why are you here?" She swallowed hard. "You're bleeding." For a moment, neither moved. Then the prince's legs weakened slightly. Ari looked around nervously. "The guards will search everywhere soon. If they find you injured, the palace will panic." Joon stared at her. "You speak boldly for a servant. You'll die boldly if you stay here." That almost sounded like humor. Almost. Finally, Joon lowered the sword. Ari quickly guided him through hidden servant passages beneath the palace until they reached an abandoned storage room. The prince sat heavily against the wall while she cleaned his wound. He watched her carefully. "You're not afraid of me?" Ari avoided his eyes. "That would be foolish. Most people are." She wrapped fresh cloth around his side. "Most people only know the stories about you." "And what do you know?" Ari paused. Then she answered softly. "That even princes bleed." For the first time in years, Joon looked at someone without suspicion. And for the first time in her life, Ari realized the terrifying crown prince looked lonely. Outside, thunder shook the palace. Inside that tiny forgotten room, destiny quietly changed the kingdom forever. If you're enjoying this story already, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from because this love story is only getting started. The corridor smelled of blood and burning wood as the palace shook with distant screams. Ari's hand trembled as she pressed cloth harder against Prince Joon's wound. Joon didn't move. He didn't flinch. But his breathing was heavy now, controlled, forced. "You shouldn't have come closer," he said quietly. Ari didn't look up. "And let you die?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "People who get close to me usually die." Her hands paused for a fraction of a second, then continued tightening the bandage. "Then I guess I'll decide when I die." That answer made something shift in him. Not softness. Not trust. Something deeper. Confusion. Outside the storage room, footsteps echoed. Multiple. Ari froze instantly. Joon reached slowly for his sword even while injured. "They found us," he said. Ari whispered, "How many?" He closed his eyes for a moment, listening. "Too many." Her voice dropped. "Can you fight?" A faint exhale left him. "I always fight." The door exploded open. 3 assassins rushed in. Ari stepped back instantly, but before she could scream, Joon moved. Even injured, he was faster than fear. Steel flashed once. 1 assassin dropped. Twice. Another fell. But the third managed to slash across Joon's shoulder, forcing him to stagger. Ari screamed, "Joon!" The assassin turned toward her next. But Joon's voice cracked through the room like thunder. "Don't touch her." He pushed forward, ignoring his wound, and drove his blade through the assassin's chest. Silence followed. Only the sound of rain outside. Ari stood frozen, staring at him. "You're bleeding more," she whispered. Joon wiped blood from his lip. "So are they." But his legs betrayed him slightly. He caught himself against the wall. Ari rushed forward again. "You're going to collapse if you keep moving." He looked at her sharply. "Why do you care?" Her voice softened. Because you didn't have to save me back there, but you did. That stopped him. For the first time, he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at her properly. Not as a servant. Not as someone beneath him. But as someone standing in the same danger. Outside, distant horns echoed across the palace. Ari's face tightened. More soldiers are coming. Joon straightened slightly. Then we leave. Ari blinked. Leave? The palace is surrounded. He grabbed his sword tightly. There are passages they don't know. She hesitated. If we're caught. We die, he finished. Ari swallowed hard. Then nodded. Okay. That single word carried more trust than either of them expected. They moved through hidden corridors beneath the palace. Dark stone tunnels lit only by weak lanterns. Water dripped from the ceiling. Rats scattered as they passed. Ari led the way at first, but Joon soon overtook her despite his injury. You know these paths? She asked. I know everything inside this palace, he replied coldly. That doesn't sound like freedom. He didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, it isn't. They stopped briefly when Ari noticed blood dripping faster from his side. You need to rest. I don't rest, he said. Ari turned sharply. Then you die faster. That made him pause. Not because she was wrong. Because no one ever spoke to him like that. Not even generals. Not even the king. He finally leaned against the tunnel wall. Ari quickly knelt beside him again, rewrapping the bandage tighter. Joon watched her hands. You're not afraid of blood. I've cleaned worse from people who didn't deserve it, she said. A small silence followed. Then Joon asked quietly, why are you really helping me? Ari froze for a moment. Not because she didn't know. But because no one had ever asked her something like that with sincerity. She looked up at him. Because you looked like no one had ever helped you before. That hit deeper than any blade. Joon looked away slightly. That's not a reason. It is mine. Silence again. Far above them, the palace roared with chaos. Orders being shouted. Soldiers searching. Ari stood slowly. We need to move. Joon pushed himself up again, forcing strength back into his body. They continued. After several minutes, they reached a sealed stone exit. Joon pressed his hand against it. It opens from the other side, he said. Ari frowned. Then we're trapped. Joon didn't respond immediately. Then he turned slightly. Stand back. Ari stepped aside. Joon lifted his sword despite the pain and drove it into the edge of the stone mechanism. Once. Nothing. Twice. The stone cracked slightly. Ari's eyes widened. You're going to break your arm doing that. Then don't watch. He struck again. The stone shifted. A final strike. The hidden door opened slightly, letting cold night air rush in. Rain poured outside. Freedom, but dangerous freedom. Ari stared at it. Where does it lead? Outside the inner wall, he said. That means we'll be outside the palace but still inside the capital. Better than inside a death trap. Ari hesitated only a second. Then stepped forward. But before she could leave, voices echoed behind them. Close. Joon's eyes sharpened instantly. They're here. Ari's heart raced. We can't fight all of them. Joon turned to her. Then don't fight. He grabbed her wrist again, but not violently this time. Run when I tell you. Ari shook her head. I'm not leaving you behind. His eyes locked onto hers. You don't get to choose that. Something unspoken passed between them. Then. The tunnel behind them filled with soldiers. Dozens. A voice shouted, the prince is here. Steel pulled from sheaths. Joon stepped forward instantly. Ari grabbed his sleeve. Joon. He didn't look back. Run. And then he charged. Ari froze for half a second. Then she did something she never thought she would do inside the palace. She disobeyed. Instead of running, she grabbed a fallen torch and stepped into the light beside him. I said I'm not leaving you, she said firmly. Joon glanced at her briefly mid-fight. For the first time, surprise. Then something like frustration. You're going to die. Then teach me how to survive. That moment changed everything. Because now, it wasn't just the prince fighting. It was both of them. Steel clashed. Sparks flew. Ari moved behind him, striking soldiers with whatever she could find, bottles, stones, anything. Joon fought like a storm unleashed. Together, they pushed forward through chaos. But more soldiers kept coming. Ari gasped, "There's too many." Joon didn't slow down. "Then we make them fewer." A soldier swung at Ari. Joon blocked it instantly. But in doing so, he took another wound. Ari saw it. And something inside her snapped. "Stop protecting me like I'm weak." Joon's eyes flicked toward her. Ari stepped forward despite shaking hands. "I'm not useless." She grabbed a fallen blade. And for the first time, she fought back properly. Not perfectly. But fiercely. Joon watched her for half a second longer than he should have. Then he smiled faintly. Barely visible. But real. "Good," he said. "Then don't slow me down." Together, they pushed forward into the storm of soldiers, toward the exit, toward a kingdom that was no longer just a palace, but a battlefield built for their destruction. And somewhere far above them, the king made a decision that would turn the entire kingdom into war. Rain hammered the capital as soldiers flooded through the palace gates carrying orders from the king himself. Seal every exit. Find the prince. Arrest anyone helping the maid. Fear spread through the kingdom faster than fire. Servants whispered in corners. Nobles locked their doors. And deep beneath the palace, Crown Prince Joon finally stopped running. The tunnel opened into an abandoned shrine hidden beneath the outer city walls. Old candles surrounded broken statues from forgotten generations. Ari collapsed against the stone floor breathing hard. Joon remained standing. Barely. Blood continued dripping from his side onto the ground. Ari looked up at him angrily. "You need help." "I need time." "You're losing blood faster than before." Joon leaned against a pillar silently. For the first time since meeting him, Ari saw exhaustion in his face. Not weakness. Exhaustion. The kind carried by someone who had spent his entire life fighting alone. Ari slowly stood again. "Sit down." Joon looked at her. That sounded like an order. It was. To her surprise, Joon actually listened. He lowered himself carefully against the shrine wall while Ari searched the room for supplies. "You shouldn't trust me this much," she said quietly while tearing cloth into bandages. Joon stared ahead. "I don't." Ari paused slightly. Then he added. "But I want to." Something tightened painfully inside her chest. Outside, thunder shook the city again. Joon closed his eyes briefly. "The king won't stop now." Ari wrapped fresh cloth around his wound. "Because of me." "Because of control," Joon corrected. Ari looked at him. "The throne controls everything. Nobles. Soldiers. Marriages. Lives." His jaw tightened. "And now it wants you dead because I chose something for myself." Ari's voice softened. "You barely know me." Joon finally looked directly at her. "I know enough." The silence between them felt heavier than war itself. Then. Footsteps. Both froze instantly. Joon grabbed his sword despite the pain. Ari whispered, "More soldiers?" But the footsteps were uneven. Dragging. Weak. A shadow stumbled into the shrine entrance. An old man wearing torn military robes collapsed onto the floor. Joon's eyes widened slightly. General Day. Ari looked between them nervously. The old general coughed painfully before speaking. You're becoming difficult to rescue. Despite everything happening. Joon almost smiled. General Day had trained him since childhood. The old warrior was one of the only people Joon respected. Ari quickly rushed forward to help him sit. General Day looked at her carefully. So this is the girl. Joon's expression hardened immediately. She stays under my protection. The old general laughed weakly. That serious already? Day. Fine, fine. But then the general's face became grim. The palace has declared her an enemy of the kingdom. Ari's stomach dropped. Joon remained calm. And my father? General Day hesitated. He gave the order personally. Silence. Even Ari felt the weight of those words. A father condemning his own son for protecting someone he loved. General Day continued. The Minister of War convinced the court that the girl is a foreign spy manipulating you. Ari stepped back in shock. What? The nobles needed a reason, Day replied sadly. Fear spreads easier than truth. Joon's grip tightened around his sword. And Seorin? General Day looked away briefly. She knows. Ari frowned slightly. Who is Seorin? Joon answered coldly. The woman my father wants me to marry. Before Ari could respond, footsteps echoed again above the shrine. This time heavier. More organized. Soldiers. General Day cursed under his breath. They tracked me. Joon immediately stood despite his injuries. You should have stayed hidden. And leave you alone? Day scoffed. You're reckless enough without supervision. Ari moved closer nervously. There's too many outside. General Day slowly pulled a dagger from his robe. Then we carve a path. Joon looked toward Ari. You stay behind us. Her eyes narrowed instantly. I fought beside you already. And nearly died. I nearly survived. General Day suddenly laughed loudly despite the danger. Oh, I like her. Joon looked irritated. This isn't funny. No, Day replied while standing painfully, but watching you finally care about someone is. The shrine doors burst open. Royal soldiers flooded inside. Dozens. Torchlight filled the darkness instantly. The captain pointed forward. By order of the king, arrest the crown prince and execute the girl. Ari's breathing stopped. But Joon stepped in front of her immediately. General Day beside him. 3 against dozens. The soldiers charged. The shrine exploded into violence. Steel clashed violently through the ancient room. Joon fought like death itself. Even wounded, every movement of his sword was terrifyingly precise. One soldier fell. Then another. Then 3 more. General Day fought beside him fiercely despite his age, cutting through enemies while shouting. You still swing too stiff. Joon blocked an attack instantly. You trained me. Then blamed the student. Ari ducked as a blade barely missed her face. Fear shook her body. But then she saw Joon take another hit protecting her. Again. And something inside her finally broke completely. She grabbed a fallen spear from the ground. A soldier rushed toward her. Ari stabbed forward instinctively. The soldier collapsed. Her hands shook violently afterward. She stared down in horror. I killed him. The world around her suddenly felt quieter. Joon turned toward her briefly during battle. His expression softened. You survived him. Another soldier attacked Ari from behind. Joon instantly killed the man before the blade could touch her. Stay focused. The fighting intensified. More soldiers kept pouring into the shrine. General Day cursed loudly. There's too many. Joon's breathing grew heavier now. blood loss slowing him down. Ari saw it immediately. If this continued, he would die here. And deep down, she realized something terrifying. The thought of losing him hurt more than her own fear. Suddenly, another voice echoed from the shrine entrance. Stop. Everyone froze. A woman stepped through the smoke wearing crimson royal armor. Lady Seorin. Beautiful. Cold. Deadly. Seorin was a Korean noblewoman with pale flawless skin, sharp fox-like eyes, long black hair tied elegantly beneath royal armor, and an aura that commanded attention instantly. The soldiers bowed immediately. My lady. Seorin's eyes locked onto Ari. And the hatred there was impossible to miss. So, she said softly, this is the maid who destroyed the kingdom. Ari instinctively stepped back. Joon moved protectively in front of her again. Seorin looked at him with disbelief. You're bleeding for her. Joon's voice remained calm. I'd kill for her too. That answer visibly hurt her. But it quickly turned into anger. You were supposed to marry me. I was supposed to obey, Joon corrected. Seorin's eyes glistened slightly. You humiliated me before the entire court, for a servant? Ari lowered her eyes. But Joon answered immediately. She's worth more than every noble in that palace. The entire shrine fell silent. Even the soldiers looked shocked. Seorin's face hardened completely. Then she slowly drew her sword. Then I'll kill her myself. Ari froze. General Day cursed. And Joon stepped forward despite nearly collapsing from blood loss. No, he said coldly. Seorin pointed her blade directly at Ari. You started a war the moment you stole him from the throne. Ari's voice finally shook. I never wanted this. But you caused it. The tension became unbearable. Then suddenly, the shrine trembled violently. An explosion echoed outside. Everyone turned. A soldier ran inside panicking. The outer gates are under attack. Seorin frowned. What? The soldier looked terrified. Half the royal guard has sided with the crown prince. Silence crashed across the shrine. Then General Day smiled slowly. Well. He looked toward Joon proudly. Looks like the kingdom finally chose a side. And for the first time that night, the war truly began. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and comment whose side you're on right now, the king, Seorin, or Prince Joon and Ari, because from this point forward, nobody escapes unchanged. The war outside the shrine did not slow down. It multiplied. The capital burned in layers, district by district, until the night sky turned red like a wound that refused to close. Inside the collapsing shrine battlefield, Crown Prince Joon stood breathing heavily, sword dripping with blood that wasn't only his anymore. Ari stood beside him. Still shaking. Still holding a stolen blade. Still alive. That alone felt impossible. General Day wiped blood from his mouth and looked at the two of them. You've officially turned the capital into a civil war, he said. Joon didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the burning exit beyond the shrine walls. They chose this, Joon finally said. Ari looked at him sharply. No, she whispered. Your father chose this. That sentence hit harder than any sword. For the first time, Joon didn't answer with authority. Only silence. Then distant horns sounded again. Not random. Organized. Seorin's army was regrouping. General Day cursed. They're forming a kill line outside the shrine. If we go out now, we walk into execution. Ari's grip tightened on her blade. So what do we do? Joon looked at her. And for a second, something changed in his expression. Not command. Not royalty. Something human. We stop running, he said. Ari frowned. That's not a plan. It is now. Before anyone could respond, the shrine doors exploded again. But this time, it wasn't soldiers. It was royal siege guards dragging heavy iron chains and crossbows. Seorin had escalated. A voice echoed from outside. Cold. Controlled. You cannot escape the throne's judgment. Seorin stepped into view through smoke and firelight. Her crimson armor now stained with ash and blood. Her eyes locked only on Ari. Not Joon. Not the rebellion. Ari. You should have died quietly, Seorin said. Ari stepped back slightly. Joon immediately moved in front of her. Seorin laughed softly. So predictable. Joon's voice was low. End this. Seorin tilted her head. This already ended the moment you betrayed your future. A long silence followed. Then Seorin raised her hand. And the siege weapons fired. Arrows filled the shrine like rain. General Day shouted, down. Chaos erupted instantly. Joon pulled Ari down behind stone cover as arrows shattered pillars around them. Stone exploded. Smoke filled the air. Ari screamed, we can't survive this. Joon grabbed her shoulders. Stay with me. That wasn't an order. It was a warning. Another wave of arrows came. Then something snapped in Joon. He stood. Ari grabbed him immediately. What are you doing? Joon looked at her once. Ending it. Then he walked straight into the arrows. General Day shouted, Prince. But Joon moved differently now. Not defensive. Not reactive. Decisive. He cut through arrows mid-air, deflecting some, letting others pass harmlessly past him like he already knew where they would land. Seorin's eyes narrowed. He's awakened. Ari stared in shock. He's going to die, she whispered. But Joon didn't slow down. He reached the center of the shrine floor. Covered in dust. Blood. Smoke. And stood directly facing Seorin. Call it off, he said. Seorin's voice was sharp. Or what? Joon raised his sword. I end the war tonight. Ari stepped forward behind him. No, she whispered. Joon, don't. But he didn't look back. Seorin noticed Ari stepping forward. Her expression darkened instantly. So you still hide behind her? That word, hide, triggered something in Joon. For the first time, his voice rose. I do not hide. Silence. Even the soldiers stopped moving. Then Joon added. I choose. That word hit harder than any blade. Seorin's grip tightened on her sword. Then choose your death. She charged. Joon met her instantly. Steel collided with steel so violently sparks exploded through the shrine. Ari screamed his name. General Day rushed forward but got blocked by soldiers. The duel was no longer political. It was personal. Seorin and Joon moved like mirrors, trained by the same empire, shaped by the same violence. But Joon fought differently now. Not for the throne. Not for survival. For Ari. Seorin noticed it. And it enraged her. You've become weak, she shouted. Joon blocked her strike. No, he said calmly. I've become honest. That moment changed the rhythm of the fight. Seorin hesitated. Just for a second. And Joon struck. Not to kill. To disarm. Her sword flew from her hand. She froze. For the first time, Seorin looked uncertain. Ari watched in disbelief. Joon could have ended it. But he didn't. Instead, he said. This ends without more blood. Seorin laughed bitterly. You think mercy makes you strong? Joon didn't answer. Seorin looked at Ari. Then back at Joon. You will regret her, she said quietly. Then she stepped backward into smoke. And vanished with her remaining forces. The shrine slowly fell silent. Only burning wood and collapsing stone remained. Ari dropped her weapon finally. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. "It's over," she whispered. Joon didn't answer immediately. General Day limped closer. "For now," he said. But Joon was staring at the burning capital beyond the shrine exit. Because he knew something they didn't. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a kingdom that would no longer obey a crown. Ari stepped closer to him slowly. "Why didn't you kill her?" Joon finally looked at her. And his voice softened. "Because I don't want to become what they already are." A long silence followed. Then distant war horns echoed again. Ari whispered. "So what happens now?" Joon tightened his grip on his sword. "Now," he said, "we take the capital." The march toward the capital began before sunrise. The city had barely stopped burning from the first wave of fighting when new war drums echoed across the kingdom. This time, they were Joon's. Thousands of royal guards had abandoned the king overnight. Not because they hated the throne. Because they no longer believed the throne deserved loyalty. And at the center of it all walked the crown prince himself. Bloodied. Exhausted. Unbroken. Ari walked beside him through the smoke-covered roads while frightened citizens watched from windows and rooftops. Some bowed. Some whispered. Some looked terrified. Because nobody had ever seen a prince declare war against his own father and survive long enough to reach the palace gates. General Day rode beside them silently before finally muttering. "You understand what happens if we fail today." Joon didn't look at him. "If we fail today, there won't be a kingdom left to save." Ari glanced at him carefully. The closer they got to the palace, the quieter he became. Not fearful. Focused. Like every step toward the throne was forcing him to bury the son he once was. Suddenly, horns echoed from the front lines. A scout rushed toward them on horseback. "The southern gate is sealed." General Day cursed. "Of course it is." The scout continued nervously. "And the king has deployed the Black Guard." The soldiers around them immediately stiffened. Even Ari felt the tension shift. She leaned closer to Joon. "What's the Black Guard?" But it was Day who answered. "The king's execution army." Ari's stomach tightened instantly. General Day's face darkened. "They only appear when the crown decides mercy no longer matters." Joon finally spoke. "Then we break them." The army pushed forward. And moments later, they saw them. Hundreds of Black Guard soldiers standing motionless before the palace gates in black armor covered with silver dragon markings. No fear. No emotion. Only obedience. At their center stood a massive warrior holding a long black spear. Commander Ryuk. The king's deadliest weapon. Ryuk was enormous, taller than every soldier around him, with broad shoulders, tan battle-worn Korean skin, shaved sides with long black hair tied behind his head, thick scars across his face, dark ruthless eyes, and black heavy armor engraved with silver dragons. Ari felt fear immediately just looking at him. Ryuk stepped forward slowly. His voice echoed across the battlefield. "Crown Prince Joon." Joon walked forward alone. The armies behind him became silent. Ryuk planted his spear into the ground. "The king offers you one final mercy." Joon's face remained cold. "Mercy?" "Kill the girl," Ryuk said calmly. The entire battlefield froze. Ari's breathing stopped completely. Ryuk continued. "Return to the palace alone. Accept your arranged marriage. And your crimes will be forgiven." General Day spat on the ground. "Cowards." But Ryuk ignored him completely. His eyes stayed on Joon. "You were born to rule." Joon answered instantly. "And she was born to live." Ari's eyes widened slightly. Ryuk's expression darkened. "You would throw away the kingdom for her?" Joon took another step forward. "No." His voice became sharper. "I'm destroying the kingdom because of what it became." Silence spread across both armies. Then Ryuk slowly pulled his spear from the ground. So be it. The battlefield exploded. The Black Guard charged first. And the war for the palace officially began. Steel crashed against steel across the capital entrance. Arrows darkened the sky. Soldiers screamed. Horses collapsed. The ground itself seemed to shake beneath the violence. Ari stayed behind the front line with medics and wounded soldiers, but even there the war felt endless. Everywhere she looked, people were dying. Because of her. No matter what Joon said. Part of her still believed this nightmare existed because she entered his life. Then suddenly, a wounded soldier crashed beside her. The prince, he shouted desperately. Ari's heart stopped. What happened? The Black Guard commander. Before he could finish, another explosion echoed across the battlefield. Ari looked up. And saw Joon. Fighting Ryuk alone. Their battle looked inhuman. Ryuk's massive spear destroyed everything around him while Joon moved with terrifying speed through the chaos. Sparks exploded every time their weapons collided. Neither man gave ground. General Day fought desperately nearby trying to hold the line, screaming orders across the battlefield. But Ari could barely hear anything anymore. Her entire world narrowed to Joon. Ryuk slammed his spear downward violently. The ground cracked beneath Joon's feet. You cannot defeat the throne. Ryuk roared. Joon blocked another strike. The throne already lost. Ryuk attacked harder. Faster. More brutal. Even Joon was struggling now. Blood ran down his arm. His breathing became heavier. And then, Ryuk landed a direct hit. The spear slammed into Joon's side and threw him across the battlefield. Ari screamed. Joon. Everything stopped inside her chest. Joon crashed into broken stone near the palace stairs. For one horrible second, he didn't move. Ryuk began walking toward him slowly. Execution. That was the look in his eyes. General Day tried reaching them. But Black Guard soldiers blocked his path. Move. Day roared. Meanwhile Ari stared at Joon motionless on the ground. And suddenly, fear became anger. Not soft anger. Not sadness. Rage. The kind born from watching someone destroy themselves trying to protect you. Before anyone could stop her, Ari ran straight onto the battlefield. Ari! Day shouted. But she didn't stop. Soldiers crashed around her. Bodies fell beside her. Still she ran. Ryuk noticed her instantly. His expression twisted slightly with amusement. So the servant finally steps forward. Ari grabbed a fallen sword while breathing hard. Her hand shook violently. But her eyes didn't. You want him? She shouted. Then go through me first. The battlefield froze again. Even Joon slowly looked up from the ground in shock. Ari. Ryuk laughed darkly. You would challenge me? Ari raised the sword despite trembling arms. I'm done watching people die for me. Ryuk pulled back his spear. Then die with them. He charged. Ari froze. Too fast. Too powerful. Death was already in front of her. Then suddenly, Joon intercepted the attack. Steel exploded across the battlefield. Ryuk's spear stopped inches from Ari's face. Joon stood between them breathing heavily, blood running down his side. His voice came out low and dangerous. You do not touch her. Ryuk pushed harder against the blades. And you cannot protect her forever. Joon's eyes darkened. Watch me. And for the first time since the war began, the prince attacked with the full intention to kill. The duel turned monstrous. Joon moved like pure fury now. Every strike drove Ryuk backward. Every clash shook the battlefield. Ryuk smiled during the fight. Not mockingly. Respectfully. Finally. A worthy king. But Joon wasn't fighting to become king anymore. He was fighting to protect the only person who ever made him feel human. Ryuk realized it too late. One final strike. Joon's sword pierced through Ryuk's armor. Silence crashed across the battlefield. Ryuk looked down slowly at the blade in his chest. Then back at Joon. And unexpectedly, he smiled. A king who chooses love over fear. Blood escaped his mouth. Might actually deserve the throne. Then the massive commander collapsed. The black guard froze. Their invincible monster was dead. And across the battlefield, the royal army began retreating. The palace gates slowly opened behind them. Not by force. By surrender. Ari stared at Joon breathing heavily through smoke and firelight. He looked exhausted beyond words. But alive. Still alive. Ari slowly walked toward him. Then suddenly hugged him tightly despite the battlefield around them. Joon froze slightly in shock. Then finally held her back. The soldiers around them watched silently. Not a prince and a servant anymore. Something else. Something stronger than the throne itself. General Day laughed tiredly nearby. Well. He wiped blood from his beard. This kingdom is never recovering from this. Joon looked toward the palace gates ahead. Toward the throne waiting inside. Toward the father who started all of this. His expression hardened again. This war isn't over. Ari looked at him carefully. What happens now? Joon stared directly toward the palace. Then answered quietly. Now I face the king. If you made it this far, comment love over throne below right now, subscribe for the final part, and share this story because the ending changes everything.